I stood outside the grand ballroom, adjusting my dress and taking a deep breath. It had been 2 years since my ex and I broke up, and I hadn't seen him since. But here I was, about to attend his wedding. I had mixed feelings about being there, but my friends had convinced me to come and celebrate his new life. As I entered the ballroom, I scanned the room for familiar faces. The decorations were stunning, with intricate flower arrangements and sparkling chandeliers. I spotted my ex, standing near the bar looking dashing in his tailored suit. He caught my eye and smiled, and I forced a smile back. The ceremony began, and I took my seat, trying to focus on the proceedings. But my mind kept wandering back to our past. We had been together for 5 years, and I thought we were happy. But apparently, I was wrong. As the bride began to speak, I couldn't help but notice the way she looked at me. There was a hint of malice in her eyes, and I wondered what my ex had told her about me. She started to talk about their love story, and I zoned out, feeling like an outsider. But then, she turned to me and said, "I'd like to take a moment to welcome my husband's ex-girlfriend. I'm sure it's not easy for her to be here today, but I hope she can find it in her heart to wish us well." Her tone was dripping with sarcasm, and I felt my face heat up with embarrassment. I tried to keep my composure, but I couldn't help feeling like I'd been publicly humiliated. I glanced at my ex, but he seemed oblivious to the tension. The bride continued to speak, her words cutting deep. I felt like I was going to cry, but then a waitress approached our table with a tray of drinks. As she set down the glasses, she leaned in and whispered to me, "Excuse me, ma'am, but I couldn't help overhearing your conversation with the bride. I just wanted to let you know that I've been serving at this venue for years, and I've seen a lot of weddings. But I've never seen a groom as nervous as he was today." The bride's eyes snapped towards the waitress, and she demanded to know what she was talking about. The waitress hesitated, realizing she'd said too much, but then she continued, "I don't know if you know this, but your husband was seen arguing with another woman in the parking lot just an hour ago. They were quite heated, and I'm pretty sure I heard him say he wasn't sure if he was ready for this." The room fell silent, and all eyes were on the bride. She looked like she'd been punched in the gut, her face pale and shocked. The groom, trying to salvage the situation, stood up and claimed the waitress must have misinterpreted the situation, but the damage was done. The bride turned to him, her voice icy cold, and asked him if what the waitress said was true. He hesitated, and that's when she noticed the text messages on his phone. Her eyes widened in horror as she read the messages, and suddenly, the whole ceremony came crashing down. The bride stormed out of the room, leaving the groom looking devastated. I felt a mix of emotions: shock, sympathy for the bride, and a hint of "I told you so." But as I looked at my ex, I realized that he wasn't the man I thought he was, and I was better off without him. The waitress came over to me and whispered, "I'm so sorry I had to reveal that in front of everyone, but I figured you deserved to know the truth." I smiled at her and thanked her for her honesty. As the guests began to murmur and speculate, I got up and left the ballroom. I didn't need to see the aftermath of the drama. I walked outside, feeling the cool breeze on my face, and took a deep breath. I realized that I had closure, and I was free to move on. 20 minutes passed, and I was still standing outside, lost in thought. Then, I heard footsteps behind me. It was the waitress, carrying a small tray with 2 glasses of champagne. "I thought you might need a drink after that," she said with a smile. We sat down on a nearby bench, and she told me more about what she'd seen. Apparently, the groom had been having an affair with one of his colleagues, and the argument in the parking lot was about him wanting to end it, but the mistress had other plans. As we sipped our champagne, I felt a sense of gratitude towards the waitress. She had given me a gift, the truth about my ex's character, and I knew that I would never forget this moment, This revelation. The waitress finished her story and we sat in silence for a moment, watching the sunset. Then, I turned to her and said, "Thank you for telling me the truth. I feel like I've been given a second chance." She smiled and nodded. "You deserve it," she said. "You deserve to be happy." And with that, I stood up, feeling a sense of liberation. I knew that I would be okay, that I would find my own happiness. The waitress and I parted ways, and I walked away from the venue, feeling like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. As I disappeared into the crowd, I knew that I would never forget this day, this moment of truth, and I was grateful for the waitress who had given me the gift of closure.